Hello and welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast, the Wednesday Roundtable edition. Conspicuously absent is our friend Luke White. So that leaves me and Billy Derrick. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Chris.
We got a lot to get to today.
Yeah, I like the Bill title there. Makes me feel old.
The Bill and Joe show. We do that one sometimes.
Like
but we've got a lot going on. As we were doing this, Ven-Allen Lubin has hit the portal about 5 minutes ago. We'll get into that. We'll get into baseball. Lots going on with that. We'll take mailbag questions. But first, this presented by Anchor Impact. Let us know, Billy, about Anchor Impact, please.
Yeah, and right as I thought I had it pulled up, I don't. So let me get that pulled up.
Well, while you're doing that,
I
was going to remind everybody, baseball season is brought to you by the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company, which is which is a family-owned third-generation milk and ice cream distribution company located in Murfreesboro. A partnership that began over 50 years ago with Purity Dairy in Nashville to provide Purity milk and ice cream to consumers in Middle Tennessee. Now they serve Southern Kentucky, Northern Alabama, Chattanooga, and North Georgia. Today they supply grocery stores, convenience stores, and others with Purity products, as well as Mayfield, Nestle, Haagen-Dazs ice cream. For more information, visit their website at mpmci.com. Basketball season and its transfer portal and everything else. Brought to you by the Wash House. Are you dreading laundry days? It's stealing time to do the things that you truly enjoy. Let the laundry professionals at the Wash House take care of that for you with 2 convenient locations in the greater Nashville area. You can drop off your dirty laundry, and their professional attendants can give you back the one thing you can never have enough of. That is your time. Within 24 hours, you can pick up your nicely folded, fresh, and clean laundry ready to be put away. Check them out at washhouseclean.com. Stop in, get your time back. Folks, go get your Purity ice cream. Use the Wash House for your laundry needs. Help out the fine folks who help us. Now, Billy, more on Anchor Impact, please.
Yeah, you mentioned basketball season, Chris. It's not quite basketball season yet. They're in the thick of the off season, though. So there's not even an off season anymore for basketball and football because of NIL, the transfer portal. And Anchor Impact is how you get closer to Vanderbilt athletics than ever before. They are the official NIL collective for Vanderbilt. As a member, you gain exclusive privileges and benefits, offering deeper engagement with student athletes, coaches, staff, and the entire Vanderbilt community, much like our interviews with guys like RJ Austin and CJ Taylor and of the like. We've got some more coming up here in the next month or so. You can access behind-the-scenes content, exclusive events, unique merchandise. You also become a catalyst for change, redefining the landscape of college athletics and showcasing the potential impact of NIL on student athletes' lives. Help the Commodores thrive and contribute now by logging on to anchorimpact.com.
Okay, so Ven-Allen hit the portal literally as we were logging on to do this.
Yeah.
What in the world?
Yeah, I'm surprised, Chris. And again, we're just now seeing this, so I got a text about it. So again, I don't even know if he's put anything on Twitter yet. I would assume he has. But yeah, I mean, kind of surprising. First off, I think the positive person, right? Not the pessimist, the optimist goes, well, maybe Byington found a post player that he likes better, had a conversation with Ven-Allen Lubin, and you go from there, because that happens all the time, of course. Hasn't happened a lot at Vanderbilt recently. You haven't been able to really push too many guys out, especially on the basketball team. But number two, you could also say Ven-Allen Lubin got a better offer, kind of like what you threw out to me before the show. And who knows? And again, maybe it's something where he's leaving, coming back to Vanderbilt as an option. If Byington, because a lot of times, Chris, as you know, this is a conversation between coach and player decides one way or the other. So I was surprised to see it this morning. Still looking forward to getting into it and seeing, why this might have happened. If they get a commit here in the next couple of days, then I think we know why. So I'm surprised, Chris. That was a guy that we had kind of checked off and saying he's back, for a while, up until now, which I think today's the last day to enter the portal. Although you say that, and you have guys entering before the window, after the, who knows. So, yeah, I was surprised, Chris, to see that. Like I said, though, I think we need to kind of give it a few days here to breathe before I think we make any overarching assessments, just because, say there's a post player he brings in a few days that fans like better. So again, it's kind of a wait and see, but initial reaction is that it hurts Vanderbilt, without
Yeah.
seeing the repercussions of this.
Maybe they will land a better guy. To be honest, I'm skeptical. I think he was a good player. I don't think he's a build your team around guy, but I've gone through the whole thing before. Like, you need a this, you need a that. Every team needs a third, fourth, fifth best player who can play type of guy. And he's in there. Like, Ven-Allen Lubin is your third or fourth best player on a decent NCAA tournament team, depending on who your 1 and 2 are. I mean, I think that's a loss. I don't have any information as we're doing this. I'm a little skeptical that they're pushing him out to bring in somebody better. I could be wrong about that. This to me feels more like maybe I got a better offer, but I have nothing to base that on. I'm just saying I don't think that when you look at roster holes, this was not a guy who was a roster hole. Now, look, if they are about to bring in another big man who's better than him and he feels like his playing time is going to get snatched away or eaten into, that's maybe another conversation. But I think what happens is, as soon as a team loses a player like this, fans go, well, he wasn't really that good anyway. I don't think that's the case. I don't think he's a superstar, but I think he's a good player. And unless there was something brewing with certainty that we don't know about, I think that's a loss. But again, this may not age well in 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, look, this portal and NIL world is so fluid that, maybe we just don't have a read on it, because let's face it, I don't think we could have predicted that flurry of commits there in that 3-4 day span from Byington, and you had put on the board that this is unbelievable, this is unprecedented. I'm shocked. I think that's all how we were feeling about that. So maybe we get shocked again. I mean, I'm kind of leaning towards you, Chris, about this. Ven-Allen Lubin is a guy that Vanderbilt sort of snatched away from Miami there, from Notre Dame. Apparently Miami had thrown a lot of money at him. Vanderbilt did as well. And he was a good get, really from the beginning. Talented kid. So somebody is getting, if he does end up going to another team, somebody's getting a good player. He's a guy that he was one of the few guys. I think, Chris, it was him, Tyrod Lawrence, Colin Smith, and that's essentially it. Maybe JQ Roberts, throw him in there, that from last year's team you'd like to keep if you're Byington. Now, do you wonder about Roberts? Does Byington want an entirely new team? Is he the only one
left at this point from last year?
JQ Roberts, other than, the bench warmers, but I mean, and then the freshmen, of course, but they weren't even on the team last year. So JQ Roberts, he's the only guy left from last year that played significant minutes, and his minutes weren't even that significant. Yeah. So, I look at this, Chris, and I go, okay, like I said, one of two things can happen here. I think what you said is more likely, that Ven-Allen Lubin realized that, okay, maybe he is in a little bit of a crowded room with a guy like Jalen Carey from JMU, who is a Byington guy and doesn't have to learn anything. And then you've also got McLaughlin from Boston College. Those three guys, McLaughlin, Carey, and Ven-Allen Lubin, pretty solid front court at that point, considering the circumstances in the last year or two of what's happened with Vanderbilt basketball. So maybe that was a playing time thing. I kind of doubt it. I mean, Ven-Allen Lubin was
he was going to play
a good player last year. I mean, he was going to play a good bit. Sometimes you just wonder about style fit, but he was committed for a while. So it's kind of a weird situation that I think we will probably get some explanation on in the next few days. But then again, you never know with this era. But yeah, Chris, at the end of the day, it happened. But I do think getting McLaughlin, without McLaughlin, I'm sitting here saying maybe there's a little concern level, but having McLaughlin and Carey, I still think you need another 5 guy that's close to 7 feet. Maybe they found that. But again, I'm kind of like you. I'm not banking on that. But
Yeah.
you also have are they clearing out money? You just never know. But then again, I am kind of leaning towards you, Chris, on this. This feels unexpected.
Yeah, I'm really excited about Carey based on what he produced a year ago. But I mean, I haven't seen him play. I don't have a scouting report of what he'll do against teams that are on a different level. But I mean, the numbers he put on paper as a freshman were pretty impressive. So yeah, I don't know what's going to happen next. I had we did the show last week where I said I think this is one of the more amazing things that I've seen in Vanderbilt basketball or Vanderbilt athletics, the way that he has flipped the roster and turned it around based on all the difficulties with getting transfers in, which, maybe the school's gotten easier, but you still have the 60-hour rule, which gets in the way. I had somebody who's pretty plugged in say, hey, and this is a person who's a big Byington fan, say to me, I think that some of this is just how awful a job the previous staff did, that anybody halfway competent could come in and do a better job, and by comparison look better. I'm not taking away from what they're doing, because I think he's doing a really good job. He's in my mind, in the PR arena, he's hit a home run so far, at least a triple, with the way he's handled some things. I like the players that he has brought in too, but I do think some of it is the last staff was so bad that anybody halfway competent was going to look better.
I think that is a good point. We got so used to covering off seasons that were pretty bland. Other than the one with Noah Shelby, Lee Dort, and Colin Smith, that created a little bit of buzz. But even the back of your mind, you had seen 3 or 4 years of product under Stackhouse, that even bringing in those guys, you had a feel in the back of your head that they're not probably staying in the program. And look where they are now. Dort's at Cal. Shelby, I think, is still at Rice. Maybe hit the portal again. And then Colin Smith is I think I heard SMU. Has he landed anywhere, Chris?
I can't keep up.
I thought I heard SMU. Okay. Yeah. It's
impossible. My week has gotten busy again the last week, and it's going to be.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, it's been a week around here anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's been impossible to keep up either way with how many players came here as a recruit and did not stay longer than a year under Jerry Stackhouse. And, we talked about that for so long. That was, if he just figured that out, if he figured a way out of keeping guys there, maybe it's different. But Byington coming in here and sort of instantly working his butt off, obviously. I mean, he told you guys in the interview, getting up at 5 a.m, biking over to campus, making sure you guys knew it wasn't from the night before, which I thought was funny. Just that style, that work ethic, you already know he has it. And I think we all knew that, whether it was Chris Dortch telling us or other insiders or people that know his style, knew that he was going to work hard. And that's a baseline thing. I mean, that you're a college basketball coach. I love how Luke mentioned that last podcast. So he's a college basketball coach. He's never been in the NBA. He's a college guy. He's a gym rat. He's a grinder. And that's exactly what Vanderbilt needed. And so, yeah, I think a little bit of it, Chris, is you're right. We just haven't seen this in 5 years. We haven't seen this style. And this is more of a Bryce Drew type. I still think he's very different than Bryce Drew, but Bryce Drew came in here and, you got Garland, you recruited. That's what you got to do. You recruit. Now, the portal wasn't a thing when Bryce Drew was here, but still, I think that it's kind of what it reminds me of, but even maybe closer to, I'm not saying he's going to do what James Franklin did for football, for basketball, but we've heard a lot of that on our board about James Franklin vibes of he's interacted with fans on Twitter. He's, going to frats and stuff. So I think early returns are obviously good, Chris. But still, a lot of it has just been so bad that, you still got to wait and see Is this more of a fans are just so eager to get basketball back that they will, at any sign of a decent player coming in, they'll react well.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that, but again, I don't think it's all been a smokescreen, but I do think there's some truth to what you said, that fans have just been so desperate that it's positive because it's just different. It feels different, and the feeling around it, even though there's no wins in the column yet, the feeling around it is better. So yeah, I do think you're right. You're right about that, to say that. But also, Vanderbilt basketball has a tradition. This is kind of the standard, getting back to water, beginning to get back up to water's level, it feels like. So
Well,
I don't want people to forget. Yeah,
go ahead.
I don't want people to forget that this is what Vanderbilt basketball should be.
You get the double hit. If he's really good, you get the double hit. You get one hit just from taking out the incompetence and the laziness from the previous regime to just, replacement. If you could, to draw a baseball analogy, if you could do wins above replacement, that staff was about a -5 wins above replacement before the first game got played. If you just started at 0, where most staffs are, you've already gotten better. And then if you're good, which I think he is, it remains to be seen how good he is. Then it goes from there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, you're right about the ancillary things. And in the off season, there was never before a season, never a feeling in the previous staff. And I don't want to harp on the previous staff, but there was never a feeling in the air. And a lot of times in the media, fans, you can feel certain things. You can feel the trajectory moving. And it just felt like it had plateaued to a degree under Stackhouse, where, they weren't going to be, of course, late there.
Somebody should have told that to other people about 4 years ago, but carry on.
Yeah, exactly. But there was never that, okay, this is going to be a really good season for Vanderbilt basketball, even before year 4. There was some excitement, but even this season, Chris, I think we got pretty close. And maybe this was an overreaction, but at a certain time, a couple weeks ago, I got close to calling this team a potential tournament team, or at least a bubble team. I mean, I'm not even kidding, just because of the guys that brought in. Now, you lose Lubin, I think that does change things a little bit. But again, player acquisition is not over. That's the thing about this era. Yeah. You got to look at that. But it's interesting, the day the portal closes, this feels like a blow. But does this mean they can't get anybody else if the portal's closed?
Well, it doesn't even mean that he can't come back. Again, we don't know what the deal is as we're sitting here doing this. Maybe that's just putting your name in the portal is basically saying I'm looking for a raise a lot of times. Maybe that's what this is. Maybe he's got somewhere else in mind. Maybe it's something else. We don't know as we're sitting here doing this. But from a roster construction standpoint, that would appear to be a loss. Well, again, we'll see what the replacement does or doesn't look like. So, anything else with hoops? Are we ready to talk baseball?
Let's talk a little baseball.
Boy, what a wild week it has been. You were at the Tennessee Tech game last night, which Vanderbilt won 8-7. If you turned it off when they were down 6-1 in the 7th, you missed a pretty good comeback. You had the roller coaster ride this weekend that started when Bryce Cunningham threw a complete game shutout. And then it kind of fell apart from there. Looked like for a brief minute that Vanderbilt was going to salvage the series. And then there was the decision to pitch to Hunter Hines, which we'll get into, that went the wrong way. And Vanderbilt ends up in a series. It was, I think, 15 runs apiece on the whole. Somebody's going to go 1-2, and that was Vanderbilt. I don't put alarm bells on that for what they are as a team, like a lot of people have, because I think Mississippi State's a good team. I think that was a pretty even matchup. But people freaked out, and I think it feels like you're seeing a coach who's feeling some of the pressure himself.
Yeah, I mean, they're searching for answers, as a lot of teams are in the SEC right now because of how good of a league it is, and you have games like that. I just think that has happened. That sort of collapse, that type of collapse has happened with this team one too many times now. And it almost happened last night. Tennessee Tech hit a ninth inning home run. Now Vanderbilt ended up winning that game. And that wasn't even really a collapse. They came back to tie it. So I want to slow down to maybe call that a collapse, but Vanderbilt should have won that game on Sunday. They should have won that game. I mean, you're at home, but give credit to State. Mississippi State is a good team. I think they can host a regional. I don't know if you agree with that, Chris, but I think Mississippi State is a very good team. Hunter Hines and Dakota Jordan are your prototypical SEC thumpers that Vanderbilt doesn't have. That was the difference in the game. Hunter Hines was the difference in the weekend. 3 home runs. I mean, the numbers on those home runs too, those weren't just home runs. Those were moonshots. That one, I mean, that was a dagger to the heart of that team. Corbin, of course, called it a kick in the nuts, and it was. They needed that game, and they didn't get it. State needed it as well. It felt like State needed that. The way they were playing it in the whole weekend, it felt like they played with a little bit more urgency, especially on Saturday. They came out and played really well. They beat Carter Holton. I mean, they beat Vanderbilt's one of their dogs, their horses. And I was surprised by that because I thought once they won on Friday with Bryce Cunningham, despite it being maybe a little fluky, I knew he had, credit to Cunningham. He pitched tremendous, but there were a ton of fly balls and some borderline home runs that Vanderbilt had caught right before the wall that I think he kind of leaned on. He only had, 4 or 5 strikeouts. So it's not like he was carving up Mississippi State. He was getting a lot of hard contact that just found defensive players. So, but credit to the defense, credit to Cunningham. So they win Friday. Then you get into Saturday, Chris, and you got Carter Holton. You're pretty confident. And for State to win Saturday, I felt like they had the momentum, and I had a feeling they were going to win Sunday, and they did. But Chris, for Vanderbilt, this team, they're fine. I think them losing Sunday probably put some urgency in them that they needed. Not that they should have had urgency already to win that series, but maybe they didn't have enough. Maybe they needed this to go to Athens and win that series. Now, Chris, there's a couple different avenues this season can go right now. Number one, this could be an absolute disaster because you're playing at Georgia, who is top 10 in the RPI. You're playing Tennessee at home, who is top 10 in the RPI. I think they dropped 3 spots last night after their loss to Lipscomb. And then you're playing at Kentucky, who's top 10 RPI. Now, is Kentucky as good as we think? I think they are. Is Georgia as good as we think? I think that might still be determined. But at home, they've been really good this year. So, but the other way is that this team finds their way. Maybe they take 2 or 3 from Georgia. Maybe because they're back home, they're able to finally win a series against Tennessee. And then maybe they get 1 or so against Kentucky. So,
yeah.
I mean, Chris, it's going to be hard for this team to win a game down the stretch. And I'm not trying to over exaggerate that and freak out. This team could go winless in these final 9 SEC games. Now, I don't think that happens, but that's how tough of a stretch this is. If they're not lasered in and focused, which they should be because exams are wrapping up tomorrow and Thursday for this team. If they're not lasered in and focused and ready to go, this could be a disaster end of the season. I'm not saying it will be. The other side of the coin is that this team wakes up, exams end, they start to play baseball, and they find ways to maybe host a regional or at least get that 2 seed because you could be looking at a 3 seed in the tournament if this season goes haywire. So, Chris, I think last weekend was massive for this team one way or the other. If they win it, maybe they don't have that urgency that they have now, but because they lost it, this trip to Athens becomes absolute must win if they want to host a regional, and that regional hosting chances just narrowed after last weekend.
Yeah, people attach a narrative to whatever happened the latest. And I know people are like, oh, they blew. Well, look, they also came back from 5 or 6 runs down a couple times within the last week. I mean, they had the game against Texas where they were down, 8 or 9 runs. They won that one. They have blown some of those. They had the Gonzaga game they blew with the defensive meltdown. And that's just baseball right now. The offensive numbers are off the charts. So, what is a 5-run lead is probably what a 3-run lead would have been 2 years ago. that's just the nature of things right now. Look, I think that they are a team. We said from the beginning of the season, is there a star in this offense? I think they had a lot of nice players, but you could not identify a superstar. That's where they are. You said, okay, if the pitching is healthy, they've got a really deep staff. Do they have a guy who can step up and give them a David Price or Carson Fulmer type year? We didn't know. I don't know that they do. That didn't mean the arms they got are bad, but you throw on top of that the injuries. I mean, it has now been Jaden Davis. It's been Jack Bolger. It's been Chris Maldonado. It's been good grief. Who else has been
Dukanich?
Well, I'm not even getting to pitching yet. Jacob Humphrey has missed time.
Mm-hmm.
That's 4. I think was Kozel hurt earlier in the year with a shoulder injury. Kozel
shoulder.
Yeah, that's 5 guys who are lineup guys or key bench guys right there. That's a lot. Like, I remember a lot of years where they didn't get more than 2 or 3 guys on the roster hurt, period.
Mm-hmm.
That's 5 players on offense alone. Pitching, Dukanich. Sawyer Hawks, we hadn't seen him, in 2 months now? That's 7 guys that are key. Dukanich, I said before the season, if things break right and we look up the end of year, Dukanich is the best pitcher on the staff. That would not shock me. He's not even available, not going to be available. So that's 7. McIlvain has been hurt. He's been out a couple weeks. That's 8. They lost J.D. Thompson to a suspension. That's 9. Again, all these are players who were contributing or would have contributed in a big way. Like, if you construct a 28-man roster and you got everybody available right now, all those guys are on that on the weekend, every one of them. And they are not the only team in that boat. Yeah. But I think people are now. Here's where people have a problem. None of those guys are superstars, so you kind of blend them in and say, well, Jack Bolger and the parts are kind of interchangeable, and I get that, but it does limit what you can do in terms of matchups. And who knows that one of those guys, in particular Dukanich, was not going. Oh, David Horn's another guy. We hadn't seen much of David Horn, and what we've seen of David Horn, you feel like there's more in there, which tells me a lot of times a guy's not at 100%. That's 9 guys. And that's assuming I haven't forgotten someone.
Yeah, J.D. Thompson pitched an inning or a couple innings yesterday.
Devin Futrell missed a month. There you go. That's 10.
Yeah. I mean, it's a ridiculous amount. I do think the positive is that a lot of those guys are getting back slowly. David Horn pitched. He struggled last night, pitched a couple. Futrell got back into it. I think we'll see him this weekend. McIlvain can start throwing today. Corbin said last night it's possible he could be available this weekend, but nothing, official there. Jaden Davis, who knows how long he's out. He's having surgery tomorrow for his orbital fracture. So that could be a season ender right there.
That's another thing. You get hit in the face with a pitch. And instead of being bases loaded because the umpire ruled that you went around, and I'm not sure he did. I'm not going to jump the ump's case for the call because I get it. Traditionally, when the bat has been where it was, you call that. But I think a little common sense has got to come in at some point, which is lacking in our world sometimes. But I mean that one play right there. Think of the ramifications. Okay, if that call goes the other way, do they have the bases loaded at that point in time, or did that force in a run?
Yeah, that would be bases loaded.
And instead of that, Calvin Hewitt comes in, he strikes out. So not only do you lose a base runner, you maybe lose a player for the entire year in that one play. And that's just the kind of spot where they're in, where some of the breaks just are not falling their way. And that had nothing to do with them.
No, they haven't fallen their way at all. And maybe the baseball gods turn their heads back toward them and start giving them some breaks here late in the season, which they could definitely use. But this is a Vanderbilt team that needs those breaks. Vanderbilt teams of the past, Chris, as you know, have not necessarily needed as many breaks as this team needs. Like the 2019 team, they could give up 8-9 runs in an inning next inning they're up 10-9, just like that.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt doesn't have that quick strike. There's a good amount of SEC teams that do. Georgia, Tennessee, A&M, Florida. I mean, you saw Mississippi State. So Vanderbilt doesn't have that explosion offensively that I think you need to have. Now, their pitching is still good. They're great defensively. I think they're getting a lot better defensively, too, especially in center field.
Yeah.
But, Chris, this is not a team coming into the season. We thought they had depth, but how good was all of their depth? When you lose a guy like a Maldonado, would you rather have him or R.J. Austin playing third? I'm not disrespecting R.J. Austin, and he's done a lot better. I think you'd rather have Maldonado at first, though. Now Jaden Davis goes down. Do you put R.J. Austin at second? Do you move Holcomb over to first? Because that's what they did last night. There's just a lot of switching now that this staff has to do, and they couldn't have this many injuries coming into the season. Now, they could get a little bit healthier. Maybe some things change, but unlike some other uber talented teams in the SEC, I'm not saying Vanderbilt's not uber talented, but unlike some other teams like a Tennessee and A&M, LSU's got a ton of talent. I think that's why they're kind of battling back right now, but Vanderbilt doesn't have that level of talent. They've got a good amount of talent. I'm not saying they're having severe drop-offs, but I think it's fairly obvious that because of these injuries, you're starting to see, okay, we're resorting to a freshman in this spot. So I just think, Chris, we're seeing that it slipped a little bit, but the overall look of it is still fine. But yeah, Chris, the luck, the amount of bad luck they've had this year has been just mind-boggling. And are they good enough to combat that? I think that's what I'm waiting on. Can they look at that and go, okay, no luck is on our side. Screw it. Let's go win a series in Georgia. Let's battle back, even though these three teams are the toughest on our schedule. And I know you had A&M and Carolina, but this is the toughest stretch they've had all year. So it's really put up or shut up time, Chris. And like I said, this has potential, and we got a good question in the mailbag, which we'll get to soon. This season has potential to go downhill quick, and it's up to this team to change that.
Yeah, we'll get to that in just a second, but I do want to mention a couple of things. People are kind of locked in their expectation of what they are, and so people hit the panic button when it looks different. And right now, they're a 2 seed. If you end the season today, they're a 2 seed. I don't think any question about it. They're going on the road to somebody else's regional, and then you're just at the mercy of the committee. You hope maybe you get sent to Indiana State, not Oregon State, or Clemson, or somebody like that. That has a lot to do with the thing that falls into the category of luck. But think if you took any other team in the league, and again, their superstar power is not what most teams in this league is. So if you take the best players off, other teams in the league, but you take most teams, you take 10 of the guys that they would have on a 28-man roster at any other school, and what's that record look like? I'm guessing it's not 11-10 in the conference. You might be more like what you're seeing at Auburn, which is, I don't think that's injury related. I think that's just the brunt of the schedule. Now they did get a break with the schedule. It could have been worse for them. They could have seen Arkansas, although they don't play Ole Miss. I think that's a team you would have liked to have gotten this year, but
they got A&M in the wrong. I'll say that.
Yeah, they got them at the wrong weekend in the wrong ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one thing that's concerning is just it's been a long time since we saw Tim's teams be just uncompetitive on league weekends. That A&M one, you had some the last couple of years. I guess it started with that LSU series here in 2022, last weekend of the year. You saw it in Knoxville last year, and it is clearly not the same program. I don't think it's one that's fallen off the cliff like everybody thinks it has. in other when you see comments on boards and Twitter. I mean, I think the truth is somewhere in between. Let's hit the late game decision stuff with Sunday, because that's been a topic of conversation. We'll start with the pinch hitting. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Again, I've had a lot going on here, and I've watched the games, but I've not watched them as locked in as I've normally been. So they were up 2 runs. They pinch hit for Leneve, or they defensive replace him with Hewitt, correct? After in the 8th inning on Sunday, I believe that's how it went down. I think I looked this up the other day.
Or Jaden Davis
For Leneve.
Okay, so yeah.
I think they put. I think they threw in. They put in Hewitt for Davis on an 0-2 count. He struck out, but I think they then stuck him in left field.
Yes.
For Leneve, is that correct?
I want to say that's correct.
Yeah. I'll let you look it up. And then they pinch hit Jack Bolger in Hewitt's spot in the 9th inning, which is where people started to lose their minds.
Yes, I think you're right on that.
Okay. Maybe I missed it. What were people wanting them to do in that spot?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, because people have criticized the decision, and I know Jack Bolger's been a flashpoint for the fan base, which I think is unfair to the kid. He's had a nice career. It has not been what people thought it would be. He's not a bad player. He's just not. He's not the superstar people thought he would be. I was looking down the list of alternatives in terms of what was left on the bench. I guess you could argue that maybe they were better off with Hewitt hitting in that spot than Bolger. Neither of them have been superstars this year. So I will tell you this. I've talked to him enough post games that you'll sometimes see a move that does not make sense as you look at it. And then you'll ask him and he'll be like, well, we're facing a righty with an excellent slider. And we feel like this guy that we pinch hit for there is our best guy to hit a righty slider in that spot. So I don't know what the analytics said that people were upset about. Again, I think it was just the choice of who they pinch hit for, which I think is unfair to the player. But I didn't see anything. Maybe I missed something. I didn't see anything glaring in that spot.
No, I mean, look, it's a situation where if you don't pinch hit for Hewitt, if you hit Hewitt there and Hewitt does the same thing as Bolger, grounds out to third, you're saying you should have pinch hit Bolger. I mean, that's what this situation is. Jack Bolger is a guy that's been in the program. Everyone loves him. I mean, he's a great teammate. He's a great student. I mean, he is a Vanderbilt. He's that Vanderbilt man. I mean, he's the prototype. Now, he's not a superstar player, but teammate wise and program player wise, he is a guy that you want in your program. And I think Jack Bolger is going to come up big in some late season moments. I think that's the kind of kid he is. He's been clutch for this team before. He was clutch at times last year late. He got hurt this year. He was out for over a month, and that's hard in the middle of a season. And so for him to come back, and anybody that's going to nitpick what Tim Corbin decides to do, I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, I see that, number one, too much on the board, and it's ridiculous. I mean, Tim Corbin has been here over 20 years. He's got 2 national titles at a program that was non-existent. I mean, they couldn't even make the SEC tournament. So let's stop with why did you pinch hit Jack Bolger? I'm with you, Chris. Why? What else are you going to do there? I guess, keep Hewitt in there. But again, it's a hindsight's 20/20. If Hewitt grounds out to third instead of Bolger, fans are going to be saying put Bolger in there. So,
well, there's a couple things that they didn't have. Billy, I think their best lefty option at that point was Matt Ossenfort, who hasn't hit in a key spot in a minute. And so it's which right-hander do you want to go with?
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to put Ossenfort at when's the last time he had an at-bat?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And so look, and Bulger's he's a veteran. And again, he hasn't had the type of year he's wanted, and maybe he hasn't produced as much in his career at Vanderbilt as he's wanted, but he's still got this season. I mean, I think, like I said, I think Bulger at some point late in this season, whether it's, one of these last 3 series, SEC tournament, regional, super, I think he's going to come up big. I think Corbin and the staff know that. They trust him. I mean, he's a guy, and it's hard to come by nowadays, guys like that.
Yeah.
And again, he's not a superstar, and he's not the best defensive player, but at the end of the day, he's stayed in this program and he's given his all. And so I don't know. I didn't understand that, Chris, and you did get that right there. Going into the 9th, defensively, you had that change. I guess in the 8th, you put Hewitt in for Leneve. Hewitt was ready to hit there. Instead, you pinch hit Bulger. He grounds out to third. Ball game over. It's how the cookie crumbled. And so, you got to live with it. But like you said, Chris, if Vanderbilt would have won that game, we're not talking about that decision, of course. That's that type of fan reaction, instant reaction in the moment that, I can't blame the fans. The fans are passionate. They want to win that game. So does Corbin. So does everybody else. And they hurt on Sunday more than anybody else. So, I didn't have any problem with that. And so at the end of the day, you got to ride with the decision. You got to be confident in it.
Yeah, I guess maybe I have missed something. I'm just wondering, what was the alternative that people wanted there? I mean, did you have Aaron Judge and waiting on the bench, and I didn't know he was on the 28th this weekend? I'm looking at it. Okay, here's what you have in that spot. Okay, you've got a runner on first, and this is where their lack of power has really hurt them, because if a guy can hit a double or a triple, then maybe you tie the game there with an extra base hit. The other thing you could have used is a guy to take a walk, to get a guy to second, where the next guy, a single, scores the tying run. Okay, neither of these guys are super patient at the plate. Hewitt's gotten better. Hewitt's walk rate is about 2 or 3 times of what Bulger's is. At this point, Bulger's walked 2 times and had 54 at bats. Hewitt's walked 9 times, had 87 at bats. Now, I don't know what that looks like in SEC pitching. Maybe that's a lot of that's been compiled against facing, UT Martin guys who can't throw strikes. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. So if you want to criticize it on the basis of you're looking for a guy to take a free pass in that spot, maybe that's your criticism. But here's the other thing. The other thing that you need in that spot is an extra base hit. And Hewitt's slugging 356, Bulger's slugging 426. So your chances of that with Bulger seem to be greater if that's your route.
Yeah, I mean, the other side of this is that Bulger, from the stats perspective, Bulger is one of the better hitters on the team. Take how much he's performed this year and how many at-bats he has this year out of it. The staff likes him as a hitter. They like his approach. He's got good vision. I mean, he reads balls and strikes, and he makes contact. If that ball hops over the third baseman, because you remember that's kind of a high chopper, it wasn't the best contact, but it was something hard. It wasn't hard, but I mean, if that bounces over to that left side, all of a sudden you've got runners at first and second, and after Bulger in the lineup, if I pull this up, would have been Matthew Polk, who has been good. Who knows what happens there?
Yeah.
So that's the scenario. That's how it played out. And at the end of the day, Chris, like you said, Bulger statistically, slugging wise, he's got a chance to go up there and hit a home run and win the game. Does Hewitt? No, Hewitt hasn't hit a home run. I mean, I guess he could have, but he hasn't hit a home run this year. So that's kind of where it's at. And, that's baseball.
Yeah, I mean, again, maybe I have missed something. I'm just not seeing the oh my goodness, that's the most mind-bogglingly stupid decision I've ever seen in the history of baseball reaction that it got. Now, look, Tim Corbin is not God. And nobody has questioned more Tim Corbin moves over his career than I have. I will tell you this. More of those probably came in the first half of my career than the second half, because I've learned there's 2 things I know about him. number one, their level of information, when you dig into it and talk to them off the record privately, sometimes is mind boggling. Like, again, he was probably thinking, I'm guessing there's something in there where there's a type of pitch this guy throws that Jack Bolger is better suited to hit than Calvin Hewitt. Now, maybe I am wrong. I could be wrong, but I've had very specific conversations with him like that over the years, where they've got a little something that does not pop on the stat sheet. So there's that. Number two, he is always going to take the long view in mind. They get kids to stay around, stay out of the portal, but because they build a culture, and the understanding is if you stick around with this, you might spend a couple years where you could be playing somewhere else, and you're going to get your shot when you're a junior or senior. Now, sometimes that comes at the expense of younger guys. There's a limit to it. You can't hit $150 all year if there's an alternate on the bench that's twice as good as a freshman. There are limits, but it does buy you some time in terms of roster building, of getting guys to stick around, that if you don't build a culture like that, you probably don't have the roster you've got, if that makes sense. Again, I'm not blindly defending Tim Corbett. He may have been dead wrong in the situation, but I didn't see it. Everybody else seemed to think that the answer was obvious and he'd lost his mind. I did not see that situation that way.
Me neither. And again, the way it happened, yeah, maybe it was easy to criticize that one decision. But again, like I said, I'll keep saying this. If Hewitt was the one that they stuck with and he strikes out or he gets out and Bolger is there on the bench, who didn't get an opportunity, I guarantee you the same people that were saying, why'd you go with Bolger, would be saying, why didn't you go with Bolger? And I'll continue to go with that.
Well, the other thing was the decision to pitch to Hines in the ninth. And I don't know how often, and we saw it again yesterday. People criticized him. I don't know how often you ever walk to put the winning run on first base in a situation. Now, you're the home team, but like if you issue an intentional pass with 2 outs last night, and the next guy hits a home run, then you have really opened yourself up for criticism. Hunter Hines had hit 2 home runs off the lefty the day before. I've been saying this for a while. Hunter Hines was due to hit better than he'd hit. He was a better hitter than the stats showed. He's probably a major leaguer at some point. He was also 0 for 4 that day. So if you walk Hunter Hines, put him on first, then you put the winning run on first, and then you expose yourself to a really big inning. As it stood, worst case scenario happened. They're down a run. Again, in hindsight, would you probably rather put Hunter Hines on first, knowing what's coming next? Yeah, you would. But show me a situation where you give a free pass to a guy to put the go-ahead run on first base with 2 outs, and I'll show you a situation that probably doesn't happen a lot at any level of baseball. Maybe I'm wrong about it, but I don't think it is the black and white thing that people have made it out to be, like, oh my goodness, he just made a mind-bogglingly stupid decision. Well, yeah, it looks bad in hindsight, but let's look at it not knowing what's about to happen.
Right. It's easy to say it after the fact. It always is. In the moment, how many people are saying walk Hunter Hines there? I don't think too many, because like you said, Chris, the situation, you're going to put 2 guys on.
Yeah.
And I mean, how many outs were there at that point? I can't remember.
Well, see, the runner was on second, right?
I think so the runner had
a double.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a little different because you get a force out at any base but home, and that part maybe goes into consideration too. But I don't know I don't remember who was next for the ground ball rate or anything like that. So,
right, and again, I see why people would say you got to walk Hunter Hines there, but at the college level, there aren't too many coaches that do that. Because a lot of times when you do that, especially in the SEC, it can end up hurting you. Now, in today's day and age, maybe coaches start changing their thinking there because of the amount of thumpers in the lineups nowadays. I mean, Christian Moore I remember a couple weekends ago against Kentucky, he had already hit 2 home runs. Now they were opposite field homers. Maybe there was a little bit of wind that day, but Kentucky does not walk him. They like to pitch to him, and he hits an absolute dagger of a home run. You've seen it start to happen more. But I mean, Chris, you've covered Vanderbilt for as long as Corbin's been here. It doesn't happen a ton where you walk a guy, especially in SEC play, with that much tension. And I went back and looked at it. There was a guy at second. Miller Green had actually just gotten a strikeout. There was a guy at second, and you elect to pitch to Hunter Hines there. But no, the how he got
Who was
to
up
second,
next?
Chris, well, hold on. How the runner got to second, David Mershon, I think it was.
Steele.
So Miller Green threw over to first, went into the dugout. He goes to second.
Right. Yeah.
So, and then for Mississippi State, up next was Connor Hijack, who had 3 hits that day. So, you're probably playing that sort of game there. But at the end of the day, it's so easy after the fact to say that. That was a tough inning. I did like what Corbin said about Miller Green. A lot of times you look at a game like that, he'll learn from that. He's a freshman.
Sure.
And that's another thing. I mean, on a Sunday, you're just not used to Vanderbilt having to turn to a freshman to close out an SEC series for you.
Maybe if Ethan McIlvain's not hurt, maybe you go to a different lefty in that spot, and it looks different, but it just was what it was.
Yeah. Yeah. You ready for the mailbag, Chris?
Let's do the mailbag. You pull it up, and I'll give our sponsors the appreciation for this one. Mailbag's presented by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If your loved one has been hurt in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call, 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Guest line presented by John Levin and the Maynard Nexus Government Contracts Group, which advises government contractors on all aspects of their needs with a proud focus on matching legal solutions to business needs. They got their very own Chris Lee. So in any case, those are 2 more people that have been longtime sponsors of the podcast. We appreciate all our sponsors. Be sure to send them a shout out of appreciation when you get a chance.
All right. Kick it off with Papa Hick for VU. Can you recall a less talented Coach Tim Corbin team from the past 15 years? That's a good question, and I've thought about that. Of course, now is the time you do it. If they win that Mississippi State series, maybe we're not even asking this question. That's always my favorite part about baseball season at Vanderbilt. Everyone lives on every single pitch, every game. But, I look back a couple years ago, Chris, 22, they finished 14-16 in the SEC. They had to win a couple series late to even get to 14 wins there. They actually won similar to this year. They had tough road series coming up at Georgia and Athens and at Arkansas. A couple years ago, they were able to win that series at Georgia, number 22 ranked Georgia, not a bad Georgia team. And then they went in on the road in Fayetteville and beat a top 5 Arkansas team. And that got them kind of back to Waters level. And of course, they get steamrolled by LSU at home to end that season. And then they have to go to Corvallis, and they fought in that one. They lost in the final game there to Oregon State. I look at that team as a team. I know they still had Spencer Jones. You had Bradfield. You had Dom Keegan. So even talent-wise, I mean, they had a thumper at least. They had a Spencer Jones, a guy that you can compare, to a Caglione. So Vanderbilt, I mean, they had their Caglione. They had their Charlie Condon that year. So even that team, I think, might have been somewhat more talented than this year's team as a whole. 2021, of course, we know how talented they were. The COVID year 2020 was an uber talented team. We know about 2019. I like that 2018 team. Chris, probably have to go back to a year like maybe 2017 where they finished 15-13 in the SEC, and they end up losing Oregon State in that super. But I mean, they got to a super that year. They beat Clemson in that regional. So I'm struggling, Chris, and you got to go back to your early time there. I mean, I was really started to get locked in 08, 09, 10, 11, right? Those years.
Yeah.
So maybe one of those early years, maybe 2010 where they lost to NC State in that regional. I don't have that encyclopedia of knowledge and kind of covering experience that you do. But in the last, 5, 6, 7, 8 years and getting close to a decade, I'm struggling to find a team that maybe is less talented and less star-studded than this team.
Okay, and I apologize. I didn't even mean to be rude to you. I missed a lot of what you said, and so I may repeat something or have glossed over something you said important. That was not my intention. I've got a record of everything they've done back to when he started here. I just had to go find where I had it and pull it up. This program has gone through lulls before. You remember 07? They went 54-13. That's the year they lost to Michigan. The next couple of years looked a lot like this year. They went 41-22, 15-14 in the league. 09, they went 37-27, 12-17 in the league. That's the closest they've come to missing the NCAA tournament since. 2010, they got it back together, went 46-20, put on a run late, lost to Florida State and Tallahassee in a super. And then the next year they went 54-12. And in my opinion, 2011, if you were to play a tournament of teams, of all his teams and put them together and play a tournament 100 times and see who's the winner, I think that 11 team I think the best two teams he ever had were 2011 and 2019. People would scream 2007, which they were ranked number 1 all year. They would also say the team that went 26-3 in the SEC. I think those teams were better than those. And the 26-3 year they had some good fortune in there too, but that's an aside. So point being here, I think that probably the worst team I've seen was the 2012 team that after 2011 went 35-28. They outscored teams by less than a run a game. I think that's the lowest scoring margin in Corbin's run here since his first year. I'd have to look at the last couple of years, but I know that wouldn't be the case. So, yeah, I mean, look, since 2011, they've probably been the best program in college baseball, even with this year. It's been a long time, but people have gotten used to a standard that's pretty much impossible to keep in this day and age, where everybody now cares about baseball. You've got the portal. You got like all the conditions in the game right now are completely antithetical to how he wants to build a team, from roster construction to the portal to engendering some kind of loyalty that goes two ways, to building a team around pitching and defense, to having guys playing college ball 5 and 6 years, which you can't get at Vandy. And they have had a horrible run of luck with injuries, which we've been through, and they're still sitting here. And if things break right, they could be hosting. I don't think that's going to happen, but let's get a little dose of reality here for a minute.
Yeah, I mean, let's finish this season before we call this one of the more talented or less talented Corbin teams the last 15 years. But again,
well, I mean, but it is. But look what you're comparing it to, Billy. I mean, that's like saying what was Nick Saban's least talented Alabama team. We're not quite there, but it's not too far off.
No, I mean, it's not that far off. But we've seen years where down the stretch of a season, exams end, this team flips a switch. So you just never know how a season's going to end up. What are your predictions, speaking of that, for wins and losses in the last 9 SEC games? Second part of that question from Papa Hick 4VU. Look, I think the more realistic thing is that they find 3 more wins in the SEC somehow.
Yeah.
You get to 14-16. That's probably not good enough to host a regional, but that's good enough to be a 2 seed and one of the probably top end 2 seeds. Because your RPI will be decent at that point. And so I don't think you would be sent out to an Oregon State like they have, feels like every 3 years.
Yeah.
So realistically, I think I would predict them to finish 14-16. They find 3 wins out of the last 9 SEC games. Even that's going to be hard, Chris, for this team because of the competition you've got coming up. And so again, I'll go 3-6, and I've changed. When I think it was a week or two ago, I had said that this team, I think they can get to 16-14, but it's hard for me to see that now. It just is. And Chris, you're showing your expertise and veteran nature here. You were closer to that, 13-17, 14-16 mark even a couple weeks ago with this team. So good read.
Yeah.
I'm back to your level. Because of the Mississippi State loss. Now I might have changed my tune if they win on Sunday, but that was a massive loss on Sunday.
Yeah, I got asked this last week. I said I thought they'd go 4-5 down the stretch. That included taking 2 or 3 against Mississippi State. They took 1 of 3. That leaves them. I'm going to go there that they'll go 3-6 on the way out the door to the season. I just think the matchups, 2 of them are on the road. 1 of them's Tennessee. Stylistically, Georgia and Tennessee are brutal matchups for them. Not saying they can't win. They may go down and win. And again, with exams being over, do they end? Have they already ended, or we're getting close?
Tomorrow, I actually asked Corbin about that. I've always wanted to actually, but he said today is most of the guys are wrapping up.
Now maybe there's some extended fatigue on the end of that to where even when they're over, they're that and then throw a road trip on top of it. But this is always a lot of times when they start playing some of their better ball when exams are done. Kentucky's interesting too because they're constructed in similar manners. And I think stylistically, Kentucky's probably an easier matchup for them. And at this point, they might be better off going on the road. I know they hadn't played well on the road, but let's look at where they played. I don't think Kentucky presents the kind of problem to them that Georgia and Tennessee do stylistically. So maybe there's, or maybe even playing Tennessee hadn't hit home runs the last 3 games, hadn't scored runs. So I don't know what's going on there exactly, but baseball has this magically correcting property a lot of times. Just when you write a team off, or think you've got it figured out to reverse. And I've seen it. I'll tell you, the team, the 2012 team, I think that was the one that they had almost no shot at the postseason with a month left. They were under 500. I may be confusing it with another team, but I'm pretty sure that was the team. And we saw this in 2018 too. That was a team that was that close to missing a regional if it didn't go well down the stretch. And they had a losing record, wound up going 16-14 in the league. All I'm saying, I've not been bullish on the matchups as they were. They underperformed what I thought they were going to perform last week. And again, one hit, one pitch, that series goes differently. They're 2-1. People probably feel differently, even though they probably don't have the right to feel differently because it would have been one pitch, but the outcome's better. So I will stick. I think they're going to wind up at 14-16. If by chance they get to 16-14, I think they probably should be hosting because look who you will have beaten to get there. And especially if that includes a Louisville win in there too.
Yeah, maybe even, Chris, if they get 5 wins out of these last 9 SEC games, that's 2 series wins.
Right.
And so I think 2 series wins against these last 3 SEC teams, no matter which 2 of them they are, probably gets you in as a host. Now, we'll see. There's still a lot of shifting to go on. Georgia's an interesting team. I was talking about this with somebody last night. How good is Georgia? They hit home runs. We know they have Charlie Condon, the home run king. They don't pitch great, similar to Tennessee. So can
Oh,
Vanderbilt
they're
jump
much
on
better
that?
pitch.
Or
Tennessee's a better pitching team than Georgia, but carry on. Sorry.
right. But kind of the same makeup of, they'll hit home runs, but not a blow you away pitching staff. So we'll see. But can Vanderbilt hang, tick for tack with them? We'll see. They haven't shown they can with that type of team on the road. I mean, let's face it, Chris, this is a series. Last few years, Vanderbilt gets swept and dominated. I mean, that's what's happened with these bad matchup type games. They need to prove that that's not what they're about. That's not what this program is. They don't fold on the road and just sort of get suffocated. So again, I'm interested, even though their track record these past few years is that they struggle on the road. VA 72. In general, this is a really good one, actually. In general, who makes NIL decisions? What part does the collective play? What part does the school and the coaches play? Does the school or collective typically interact directly with players or with their agents when negotiating NIL money? Short answer, no one knows. No one has any answers to these questions.
Yeah.
The technicalities of it, from our understanding, though, is that the collectives are the ones running it. Now, the athletic director, of course, is involved because that involves the school. But what part really does the school and the coaches play? And are those rules being broken? Yes. They are most definitely being broken. I mean, that's you've seen it. Nick Saban at the NFL draft on ESPN said, "We tried to get this kid into the portal, the Toledo cornerback."
Yeah.
Coach Saban.
I don't know that that's what he said. Did he say that, or did he say, because here's what happens.
Tried to get him in. He said, we tried to get him into the portal and he wouldn't enter the portal. So it was pretty clearly them admitting the fact that they wanted Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo to enter the portal and come to Alabama. Now, again, maybe he did.
Where's the placement of "in"? Because I heard the same thing. I thought he said we were hoping to get him.
Well, he added the fact when he said
if he were in there's a difference between we were hoping to get him if he were in the portal, which means we're watching to see who goes in the portal. Then we'd like to grab him, and the difference in saying we hope to get him in the portal, which would read as tampering.
Yes, when he added on kind of after, he said, but he would never enter. He said we wanted him to enter, but he would never enter. That's how I read it.
That doesn't mean he tampered. I'm sure Vanderbilt would love for, Zakai Ziegler to enter the portal and make him their point guard next year. That doesn't mean Vanderbilt's tampering. You know what I'm saying? True. I would I've seen a lot of this lately on social media where words, if you get a word or two out of place, and then what happens is it gets tagged with the headline, and Nick Saban and nobody goes back and watches the video.
Yeah.
I don't know. When I heard the wording, I'm not, maybe that's what he said, but I think we're in the day and age where things take on a life of their own, and I'm not sure about that.
No, I see what you're saying. Moral of the story is that these rules are being broken. And that's the biggest problem here. Who makes NIL decisions?
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. Is there a president of these collectives? Are there multiple presidents of these collectives? Is the head coach going to the collective and meeting? Is the head coach going to the AD? I mean, I have a lot of the same questions that VA 72 does here, but Chris, I'll kind of throw them back at you one more time. Who makes NIL decisions? What part does the collective play? What part does the school and the coaches play? Does the school or the collective typically interact directly with players? So with that.
Anchor Impact, we know that they're run by our friend DeJuan Epps, who runs the collective. At the same time, I know Bill Hawkins is heavily involved in the baseball end of their collective. And I also know that Tim has always kind of done things on his own, as we've said. It's his program, basically, for the most part. Now, he's under – does he have to answer to the school about certain things? Of course. He can't make decisions for the admissions office or things like that. So let's not take it too far. But here's my point. As much as Tim Corbin can control that touches his baseball program, he has always done that. Is Tim Corbin going to sit down and give us an interview? These are exactly the mechanics of how that all works out. And we do this and we do that. And no, he's not. He's never been that type of guy. So where do we find the truth and how all that works for me? I don't exactly know, but that is what I do know.
All right. Go Doors 94. When our exam's over, we got to that. Like I said, I think most of them are wrapping up today. Maybe some stragglers tomorrow morning before they head to Athens. But yeah, most of them are wrapping up today. Hogan knows. We already answered this earlier. Why didn't we walk Hunter Hines? Got into that. Who you with, VU? I feel like Vanderbilt could out NIL almost anybody. Are those feelings legit? I think so Vanderbilt, the problem there is that Vanderbilt as a school, I mean, their endowment is eons better than any other SEC school. I mean, if you take their endowment, it's not even in the SEC stratosphere with the other schools. But that doesn't mean, Vanderbilt money doesn't always mean that helps you NIL wise. A lot of the Vanderbilt money, academic based, academic scholarship based, things like that. Now, again, I still think you mentioned Hawkins, John Ingram. We've talked about Mark Cuban's involvement. Other people like that have kind of emerged. Not Ingram and Hawkins have been there forever, but you start to think about guys like a Cuban or other factors in the NIL world with Vanderbilt have emerged. So I think that's helped them. But to its core, I would almost say yes to that, Chris. I think they should be able to, but because of their slow start and because of their, I think, poor execution early on, and really honestly not even really talking about it when everyone else was. Like what Ole Miss did was sort of the opposite of what Vanderbilt did. Ole Miss jumped on it early before anybody. And Vanderbilt kind of said, "Oh, everybody's doing this. Let's enter this world. Let's kind of wake up." So I think that kind of hurt them. But Chris, I don't know how you feel about that. I think I've told that to a lot of people. I don't think they could out NIL almost anybody, but I do think they should be, at the very least, if there were NIL rankings, I think Vanderbilt should be in the top 30. I mean, I think they've got the people in place now. The winning, the track record, things like that, they just don't have that with their sports. But just pure NIL money wise, we've seen it with football. You've talked about it, Chris. Basketball with Byington, there's got to be some NIL involved there. Baseball, they've still got some catching up to do, I think. But I don't know. I don't think I would say yes to that question, but I'm pretty close to saying that Vanderbilt could out NIL almost anybody. I mean, they're middle of the pack SEC right now, I think most people would say.
That's hard to answer. Look, you go downtown, Nashville. You walk a quarter of a mile, you're going to see the Frisk name or the Ingram name show up on a building somewhere, probably.
Yeah.
You're talking about billionaire families. Those are two families that are involved in their collective. Mark Cuban has gotten involved to some degree, and and those people with that kind of money, a lot of times their business is kept privately where you never know. Vanderbilt's got all kinds of wealthy people at its disposal that are mega wealthy that we probably, even if you said the name, we wouldn't know him from our next door neighbor. They've got people that could write checks that could dwarf probably what everybody in this audience listening can do with one stroke of a pen. So that's kind of the way the world works right now. Arkansas has got that going, I think, with the Tyson Chicken people. That's how John Calipari ended there. That's how they're landing all these people in when you've got somebody like that, or a couple of somebodies like that are mega wealthy and just want to write a check to win at whatever level and can do it, it's just hard to know how to rank those situations
Yeah.
against the rest of the world.
Yeah, I think the very least to add on to that is that they're swimming in that water. And when just a year and a half, 2 years ago, they just weren't. I mean, they weren't even. There wasn't much of an attempt. But having Clark Lee adjust, having Mark Byington come in here immediately and understand it and get it has been good. Now I think there's probably an adjustment period there for Tim Corbin and that staff and that program to say, look, we need to really dive into this. We've been missing out. So not saying they haven't used it, because they have it. I mean, every player has an NIL deal. But how active are they in the portal? I think that has been potentially what's been missing the last 3-4 years. Door fan, fill in the blank with a number. First one, Vanderbilt has to win blank of the last 9 SEC games to host a regional. I think at the very least they have to win 5, because 5 wins in these last 9 SEC games means you win 2 of these last 3 series. And as I mentioned earlier, those are 3 top 10 RPI teams right now, currently, 2 of them on the road. If those 2 series wins here out of those 5 wins are on the road, Georgia, Kentucky, I think you're hosting. And that would, even if you're at 15, 15-15. I think this is a kind of year in the SEC where you've got these 4 powerhouse teams. And if you got screwed scheduling wise, but you were able to get to 15-15, committee may look at you a little bit differently. And I think, Chris, would you agree with that? They got to win at least 5 out of these last 9 to host a regional. And maybe you could say 6.
You have the right answer. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so, and then he adds there, Warren Nolan has Vanderbilt at 21, Georgia at 9, Tennessee at 8, Kentucky at 3.
They might lose some of those games and move up in the RPI or stay where they are, just because those teams are so high.
Exactly. Let's see. VU Superior. If we sign another 2 offensive line starters and an impact wide receiver, and Diego Pavia plays like he did last year, and the defense improves to be top 10 in the SEC, do you think we can win 4 to 6 games? Absolutely. With those, with that scenario, you improve your offensive line, you add an impact wide receiver, and Pavia plays like he did last year. I mean, Pavia led New Mexico State to 10 wins, and I think he was Conference USA Player of the Year. So if he has a conference type Player of the Year season, this team would get to 6 wins. In the defense part of that, they don't have to, to improve, by leaps and bounds defensively. I think if they just get a few spots better, who knows? I mean, this SEC is just such a monster. But I'm confident this defense is going to be better. I'll say that. But Chris, with that scenario, they can absolutely win 4 to 6 games.
Yeah, that's a lot of ifs to unpack there, and I'm not sure that those ifs are very realistic. I don't know. They've got a talent issue fundamentally. We'll see how that resolves in the portal in the next few weeks, but that's not a team that is going to go out and beat a lot of people. Can it beat Alcorn State and Georgia State and Ball State? Yeah. Beyond that, I don't have a lot of certainty without things getting a lot better. And even then, we thought we weren't even putting UNLV as a loss on the radar this time last year, and we saw how that turned out.
Yeah, last year taught us a lot, I think, to how to think about the talent base they have right now. Now they've gotten better. Pavia, I think, is such a Pavia. It can be a player that really turns this season. Now, so can Nate Johnson. I don't. It's been all about Pavia. Let's not forget about Nate Johnson. They brought him in initially. But I think with all the New Mexico State coaches they've brought on, it's starting to feel like just naturally, human instinct, Pavia could be the guy here. Now, again, I still really like Nate Johnson. I'm not ready to say Pavia is the guy, but we'll see. And of course, Nate Johnson got maybe a bad rap from some people on the board about spring practice. look, Luke said it. Spring practice doesn't really matter. I mean, he's been to a
Yeah.
lot of them. You know, you can agree or disagree. And playing behind that offensive line, I'd like to see Pavia play behind the offensive line they were throwing out there in the spring. I mean,
Yeah.
so that's the other side of it. Okay, last one, Vandy rule. We already kind of talked about this. Why would Ven-Allen Lubin leave at the last minute? That's a really good question. I mean, my only thing here, Chris, and again, I think we talked about it, the last minute type thing means to me that there was a team that came in late, obviously, and said, hey, we like you. You know, you just came on our radar. And I think here in the next few days, because it was so late, you could see him land at a pretty decent school. But again, who
Billy,
knows?
is we're doing this, I've gotten text messages from 2 different circles with 2 different SEC schools as potential destinations for him. So, I mean, what does that tell you?
That tells you all you need to know.
I mean, well, who knows, right? Anybody can throw something out there, but that's the world we live in.
Yeah. I mean, that is what it is. So that's my thing, because it was so late. I don't see him coming back anytime. This feels like a surprise. You know, so that's what I've got there. But that's what we got for Mailbag.
Yeah. We've done an hour and 21 minutes, which seems like enough. Although there's a lot to talk about these days, and there's a lot more to get into, but we'll hold that till next week. Any parting thoughts, Billy?
Yeah, I mean, Georgia, big series this weekend.
Yeah.
You know, this team, they need to go down there and fight. And you know, even if they take one and just look competitive and maybe lose, you know, a tight one late Sunday, I mean, just be competitive. This team can't look like they did against South Carolina or an A&M. Show that you can go on the road, because I think most likely this team will be on the road in a regional. You know, all things considered. So can you show this weekend that you can go on the road and beat a quality team? Because that's what you're probably going to have to do in a regional. So I think that'll be big. That's what I'm looking at basketball-wise, trying to figure out this Ven-Allen Lubin situation. And, you know, football, we got a break. So I would think a lot of the coaches maybe vacation. But then again, this is still crunch time for a lot of those portal players. So
I don't think there is vacation in college sports anymore.
You got that right.
We don't get one.
Yeah, same for us.
All right. Thank you to our sponsors, Sutherland and Belk, the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company, the Wash House, Maynard Nexon, Anchor Impact. I think I got them all. It's 5, I believe. My apologies if I missed anybody. It's been a day already. For Billy Derrick, I'm Chris Lee. Thanks for watching and listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast.